My parents abandoned me in a foreign country at 17, leaving only a note that said, "You're old enough to survive. I had to figure it out on my own." Welcome to my YouTube channel. This channel shares stories based on ideas from Reddit threads, covering family, friends, and life experiences. Today, we have a story that revolves around a young woman who was abandoned by her parents, left to fend for herself in a foreign country. Can you relate to this situation? Or maybe you've gone through something similar. Stay tuned to find out how the character overcomes this challenging chapter of her life. And by the way, if you enjoy the story, I would really appreciate it if you could help me reach 1,000 subscribers soon, so I can continue bringing more amazing stories your way. It was supposed to be a fresh start. That's what my parents said. A reset trip, a break from everything back home, school, friends, the mess we were all tangled in. They promised me this trip would bring us together. No distractions, no deadlines, just the three of us, escaping to a place of peace, far from the noise of life. We flew to Tokyo when I was 17, a city that felt like the future. Skyscrapers, neon lights, the buzz of excitement in every corner. I was hesitant at first, unsure about the whole thing, but I let myself believe. For once, my parents weren't just acting like distant figures. We were supposed to reconnect. For the first few days, it was awkward but hopeful. I remember walking through the crowded streets of Shibuya, seeing how everything was so different from my small town. Felt like everything could change. Maybe this was it. Maybe this trip would actually bring us together. But then, the morning everything turned. We had breakfast at the hotel buffet, just the three of us. My mom, wearing that coral lipstick she saved for special occasions. My dad, sipping his black coffee while reading the paper, not even looking up. That morning was different. They told me they'd be gone for a little while, just running errands. I barely looked up from my phone as I nodded, replying to messages from my friends about how things were going. An hour passed, then two. I was still scrolling through Instagram when I started to wonder, where were they? Why hadn't they come back yet? For hours later, I went down to the front desk and asked if they'd seen my parents. The clerk, who barely looked up, said, "The couple from room 302, they checked out this morning." I ran up to the room. Empty. My suitcase? Gone. My passport? Gone. Even my backpack? Gone. It was like I'd never been there at all. I called them over and over. No answer. Texts. Not delivered. My heart raced. What was happening? Panic set in. I had no money, no ID, no way to get home. And the only thing left in the room was a folded note in my mom's handwriting. "You're 17 now, old enough to survive." There it was. The cold truth. They didn't forget me. They left me behind. They erased me from their lives. I spent that night in the hotel lobby, crying. The kind of crying that makes your chest ache and your throat burn, but doesn't quite make it to the point where you can actually breathe again. I remember staring blankly at the fluorescent lights above, the hum of the air conditioner, and the relentless sound of my own thoughts. I couldn't stop them from racing through my head, over and over again. Why? Why did they leave me? What did I do wrong? I had hoped, just for a second, that maybe it was some sort of mistake. Maybe they'd show up in the morning, apologizing and explaining. But deep down, I knew there was no coming back from this. No explanation could undo the damage they had done. The night felt endless. It was as though I was suspended in time, caught between the comfort of the hotel lobby's fake warmth and the cold, hard reality of being completely, utterly alone. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, the fear crept in, colder than the air around me. Every noise, every unfamiliar face that passed by, reminded me that I didn't belong here. This wasn't my life anymore. I was nobody, lost in a place where no one cared. The next morning came without any sense of relief. I walked to the embassy, my heart sinking further with every step. I couldn't help but feel the weight of the city around me. Tokyo. The hustle and bustle of the crowds felt like it was moving too fast for me. I was just a speck, a flicker of a moment that no one would notice. Felt surreal, like being in a dream I couldn't escape. When I reached the embassy, I was barely holding it together. I stepped up to the counter, trying to mask the panic rising in my chest, but my voice still trembled when I asked for help. The woman at the counter looked at me with a blank expression as she typed into her computer. The minutes dragged on, and I could feel my hands trembling, my body fighting to stay composed. She finally turned to me, her voice cool and impersonal. "Your return flight was canceled. We have no record of your parents having contacted us. Your name has been removed from their health insurance, and your emergency contact is no longer valid. I'm sorry, but it's as if you've been erased from their lives." Those words felt like a blow. I was no longer just abandoned. I had been erased, not a trace left behind. I wasn't a part of their world anymore. I wasn't even a part of this world. The next few days were a blur. Every morning, I woke up, not knowing where I would sleep that night. I wandered the streets of Tokyo, a city so full of life, but it felt like I was invisible. The neon lights, the fast-moving crowds, the constant rush of people. None of it mattered. I was lost in a sea of faces, yet nobody saw me. I didn't know where to go, who to talk to, or how to fix any of this. All I could do was walk, moving from one place to another, hoping for a sign, for something familiar. But there was nothing. By the third day, I had wandered so far from the hotel that I found myself in a part of the city I didn't recognize. The streets were quieter here, away from the tourist areas. I walked aimlessly, drawn by the soft, golden glow of a 24-hour cafe. I couldn't tell you why I walked in, but it felt like the only place I could go. It was dark inside, warm, and comforting in its simplicity. There was a small table by the window, so I sat there, trying to make myself small. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, shivering slightly from the cool air seeping through the fabric. The smells of fresh coffee and pastries filled the air, but I couldn't bring myself to order anything. I was too tired to eat, too tired to care. My mind was elsewhere, on the events of the past few days, on my parents, and on what I would do next. I looked out the window, watching the headlights of cars streak by, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. The city seemed so alive, so full of energy, and yet I felt completely disconnected. How did I get here? How did my life get to this point where everything I knew was gone, taken from me in one moment? I stared at the neon lights flickering in the distance, but it didn't feel like they were shining for me. They were just there, distant, indifferent, like the world itself had forgotten I existed. I could feel the tears again, welling up, but I swallowed them back down. I had no more tears left to cry. I had to figure this out. I couldn't fall apart now. That's when I saw her. Mina. She walked past me, her eyes sharp, like she could see through me. She was older, with graying hair tied up in a loose bun, and there was something about the way she moved, calm, sure of herself, that made me feel like she knew more than she let on. She didn't ask questions, didn't push me to explain. She simply looked at me and said, "If you're hungry, you work." It wasn't an offer. It was a statement, a quiet, matter-of-fact way of saying that she understood what I needed. I didn't have to explain myself to her. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. She led me to the back of the cafe, where the air was warm and smelled of fresh-baked bread. She gave me a task, washing dishes. At first, I hesitated. My hands were shaking, my body exhausted, but I did it. I worked with every ounce of energy I had, scrubbing the dishes with a focus that helped me forget, even if for a moment, about the mess of my life. Mina didn't ask about my past. She didn't try to dig into the reason I ended up here. She didn't need to. She saw what I needed, and she provided it. A job, a sense of purpose, something to hold on to. Over the next few days, Mina didn't just give me work. She gave me space. I was able to sleep in a small corner of the cafe, tucked away from the world outside. Every day I worked, doing whatever she asked. I scrubbed pots, wiped counters, carried flour sacks that were almost as big as me. Sometimes, I would catch a glimpse of Mina as she worked, and I would try to imitate her. The way she moved with such ease, knowing exactly what to do. I didn't know it at the time, but those small moments were teaching me more than I could have imagined. Mina's quiet strength and determination were starting to rub off on me. I was learning how to survive, not just by getting through the days, but by learning how to fight for my place in a world that felt indifferent to my existence. One evening, after a long day of work, Mina handed me a hot bowl of miso soup. It was the first real meal I had in days. I sat in the back room of the cafe, sipping the soup, feeling the warmth spread through my body. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel completely lost. Mina didn't say much while I ate, but her presence was comforting. She sat across from me, peeling an orange. The soft glow of the kitchen lights bathed her in a warm, golden light. She didn't speak much about her past, but I could tell from the way she moved, from the way she carried herself, that she had lived through her own struggles. She didn't ask me to tell her my story, but somehow I felt safe around her. I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could make it through this. I wasn't alone anymore. I worked for Mina for weeks, each day becoming a little easier than the last. I learned Japanese so I could communicate better. I learned how to carry the weight of flour sacks without falling over. I learned how to wash dishes faster, more efficiently. But more than anything, I learned that survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about finding a way to live, no matter the circumstances. I wasn't just surviving. I was starting to rebuild. I wasn't just surviving. I was learning. Every day, every hour, every moment became a lesson. And those lessons were hard, like grinding my teeth through bitter coffee, swallowing them down until they burned their way through my core. The world didn't owe me anything, but somehow I'd always believed it did. I had spent years living in a bubble, distracted by comfort, by other people's expectations, by the idea of a future that was already paved for me. But now that future had crumbled, and I was left to figure it out, piece by piece, alone. Mina didn't teach me how to run a business or how to build a career in a corporate sense, but she taught me how to survive, how to get up every day when the world tries to push you down. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't fancy, but it was real. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She simply offered a space to breathe, a job to keep my hands busy, and the kind of wisdom you only get when you've lived through things that no one wants to talk about. For the first time in my life, I was actually learning the value of hard work. The kind that keeps you up at night, not because you want to escape it, but because it's the only thing that keeps you going. I worked for Mina every single day without complaint, no matter how tired, how hungry, how alone I felt. I scrubbed pots until my hands ached. I wiped counters until I couldn't see the dirt anymore. I carried bags of flour that were almost as tall as me, trying not to fall over as I dragged them from the back to the front of the shop. And every night, I came home to the little corner of the backroom Mina had given me to sleep in, wondering how far I could really go if I just kept pushing. The months bled into one another, and as the days passed, I started to understand what it meant to be truly independent. Not just financially, but emotionally. There were times when I felt like giving up, when the exhaustion of it all felt like a brick wall I couldn't get past. But then, in the quiet moments, when I was alone, scrubbing the dishes, or counting the change from the register, I started thinking about the future. About my future. I saved every penny I could. I barely ate. I didn't have the luxury of going out to a restaurant or treating myself to the little things that once seemed so important. I took the train to the market every Sunday, keeping my head down, trying not to make eye contact with the bustling crowds, and bought only the essentials. I lived off instant noodles for weeks, saving up whatever small amount I could from my wages. Mina watched me quietly. She knew what I was doing, though she never asked why. I don't think she needed to. She understood that this was a process I had to go through on my own. I was starting to change, piece by piece, and she never tried to rush me. Then one day, Mina gave me something that changed everything. It wasn't much, just an old laptop. Someone had thrown it away, but Mina knew it could still be useful. She handed it to me with a small smile. "Fix it," she said simply. "You never know when something small like this might change your life." I took the laptop from her, a bit uncertain at first. It was a relic, old, scratched, with a cracked screen and a few sticky keys. But something about it intrigued me. I wanted to make it work. I wanted to prove to myself that I could do something more than just survive. I spent hours every night in the dim light of the back room, trying to fix it. I cleaned out the dust, replaced the battery, and wiped the keyboard clean. When it powered on for the first time, my heart skipped a beat. It was slow, sluggish, but it worked. I connected to public Wi-Fi from a nearby cafe, sitting outside on the cold concrete, trying to avoid the prying eyes of the passerby. I spent hours reading articles, watching YouTube videos, and diving into whatever I could find about business, finance, and investing. It was a steep learning curve, and I often felt like I was drowning in a sea of technical jargon, but I kept at it. I learned the basics of stock trading, how markets worked, and how to make smart financial decisions. Every time I watched a new video or read a new article, I felt like I was gaining a little piece of control back over my life. I didn't know it at the time, but that old laptop was more than just a tool. It was my ticket to freedom. Every hour I spent learning, every new thing I discovered, brought me closer to something bigger than survival. I was starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. One day, after months of reading and studying, I made my first investment. It wasn't much, just $200, the last of the money I had saved. I had read about a small, underperforming startup in an online article. They had big ideas but were struggling to stay afloat. It seemed like a long shot, but I had learned one thing in all my research. The biggest rewards often came from taking calculated risks. I threw my $200 into the company, telling myself that if I lost it, at least I would have learned something. But to my surprise, the investment tripled in 2 weeks. Couldn't believe it. My hands shook when I saw the numbers in my account. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a victory. It wasn't just surviving anymore. Knock knock. Now you're about to watch the best part of the story. But before that, make sure to subscribe to my channel so we can keep going together. By the time I turned 20, I was no longer the same person who had wandered the streets of Tokyo, with nothing but a backpack, some change, and a head full of uncertainty. I had transformed, not by magic or luck, but by sheer will and a relentless drive to reclaim control of my life. I had become a budding entrepreneur with a small consulting business. The work I did wasn't flashy or impressive in the eyes of many, but it was mine. I helped local businesses, small, struggling ones, optimize their digital strategies, guiding them through the complexities of social media, e-commerce, and online marketing. What used to seem impossible was now part of my everyday reality. I wasn't just teaching them, I was teaching myself too. I had learned how to build something from nothing, how to grow and adapt, and how to rise after every fall. Through this work, I discovered the power of the internet, not as a tool for entertainment or distraction, but as a gateway to freedom. I taught other young people like me who had been thrown into the world without a safety net. I showed them how to use the resources they had at their disposal: smartphones, internet access, a bit of time and determination, to create income streams. I wanted them to understand what I had learned the hard way. You don't need to wait for someone to give you a chance. You can create your own. Still, despite the growth, I kept a low profile. The last thing I wanted was fame. I didn't want to be known. I didn't care if anyone knew my name because I didn't do it for the recognition. I did it for something much deeper: freedom. The kind of freedom you feel when you wake up in the morning and know that the choices you make today will directly shape your tomorrow. When you can finally make decisions without feeling trapped by anyone else's expectations. Building my life from scratch had been grueling, but every success felt like a small victory. A slap in the face of those who had abandoned me, telling me I wouldn't amount to anything. I wasn't just building a business. I was building myself piece by piece. Every step forward was a reminder that I was still here, still standing, still fighting. The memories of those early days, the nights sleeping in alleys, the empty stomachs, the crushing loneliness, pushed me to keep moving, no matter how tough things got. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was learning how to thrive. It was late one night, after finishing a project for a client, that I was scrolling through an online business forum, something I did to unwind. I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. I was just curious, reading about trends, new technologies, the ups and downs of other entrepreneurs. But then something caught my eye. A post about the company my parents had helped start years ago, the one they had poured everything into, the one they had chosen over me. I clicked on the post without thinking. It was about the company's financial troubles. They were in foreclosure. The company that had once been their dream, the one they believed would give them a fresh start, was now falling apart, just like the life they had tried to build without me. I couldn't believe it at first. It was like a punch in the gut. Part of me felt vindicated, but another part of me just felt empty. They had traded me for this. They had chosen their business, their so-called new life, over their own daughter. And now, that very thing they had believed would save them was crumbling. It was almost poetic in a way, but it also lit a fire in me, something deep and urgent. This was my chance. Something inside me clicked. It wasn't just the fact that I had the resources to make an offer. It was that I realized I had earned the right to take control of this. My parents had built that company, but they had never built me. They had abandoned me, thinking I would fail, and now I was in a position where I could do what they couldn't. I could make the business my own. I wasn't doing it to prove them wrong, though. I wasn't driven by revenge. I was driven by something stronger, something more significant. I was doing it because it was mine, because I had every right to own what was rightfully mine, something they had never understood. So I did it. I bought the company. The process wasn't easy, but it was calculated. I wasn't impulsive. I had done my research, understood the risks, and knew that this was my chance to not only claim what was mine, but to make something of it. I didn't want to repeat their mistakes, nor did I want to go down the same path. I wanted to breathe new life into what they had abandoned. I wanted to take the foundation they had laid and build something even stronger from it. The legalities took time. Weeks of meetings with lawyers, contract negotiations, and piles of paperwork. But eventually, the deal was done. I had bought it. I sat there, staring at the papers in front of me, the weight of what I had just done sinking in. The company that they had thought would be their salvation was now mine. But this time, it wasn't just about ownership. It was about creating something different, something better, something that was going to reflect the lessons I had learned along the way. Resilience, adaptability, and the belief that nothing is ever truly lost if you're willing to fight for it. I didn't do it for revenge. I didn't need to show them that I was capable of succeeding. What mattered to me was that I had built this. I had built myself. And now, with the company in my hands, I could show the world that I was not the same person they had left behind. I wasn't that scared girl anymore. I was stronger, smarter, and more determined than ever. Now, I had the power. I had the opportunity to rewrite the story, not for them, but for me. I had been handed the pieces of their shattered dream, but I was going to craft something entirely new, something they could never have imagined. I wasn't just going to survive in their world. I was going to thrive in it, and I was going to do it on my own terms. As I signed the final papers, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. I felt something different. Peace. Because I had taken the legacy they thought they had left behind, and I had made it my own. I was no longer a part of their story. I had my own now. The day I signed the papers for the company was surreal. It felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down at the life I had built for myself, but somehow still unsure whether I'd truly made it. I could barely believe it. My hands were steady, but my heart was pounding in my chest, like it was trying to escape. The reality of what I had just done was still sinking in. I had achieved everything they thought I couldn't, everything they had denied me. I wasn't just buying back a company. I was buying back my dignity, my power, and my future. The past 2 years had been a whirlwind. I'd come from nothing, from a life of abandonment and rejection, to being the owner of a business my parents had once cherished. They thought I'd fail, that I'd fade into the background like a forgotten memory. But I hadn't. I had grown. I had fought for everything I had, every inch of success I'd earned, and now it was mine. The company, the legacy, they were all in my hands. But there was one final act I needed to complete. One last confrontation. I went back to the States to meet with my parents. I remember the flight back like it was yesterday. The anticipation weighed heavily on me, but it wasn't fear that gripped my heart. No, it was something else. Something more like resolve. I wasn't returning as the girl they abandoned. I wasn't returning to beg for a place in their lives. I was returning as someone who had built herself from the ground up. Someone who had created her own success, without their help, without their approval. As I walked through the doors of their office, I couldn't help but notice the sterile, impersonal vibe of the place. It hadn't changed, but I had. When they saw me, their faces showed nothing but confusion at first. They didn't recognize me. The girl they left behind, the one they thought would never amount to anything, had somehow become someone unrecognizable to them. "Can I help you?" My mother's voice trembled slightly. Her eyes flickered over me, trying to place me, as if I were a stranger in a world that used to be mine. I stood there, calm, confident. I knew this moment would come, but I hadn't anticipated the strange calmness that washed over me. I wasn't the scared girl who had cried herself to sleep in a strange country. I wasn't the one who had begged for attention. I had transformed. I was stronger now, confident in my own skin, and it felt good. I slid the ownership papers across the table, the documents crisp and final, proof of everything I had achieved. I watched them tremble as they unfolded the papers, their hands shaking, eyes widening in disbelief. They didn't know who had bought the company. They didn't know that the girl they had left behind was now the one in charge. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Their disbelief filled the room like a thick fog. I had imagined this moment countless times, imagining how it would feel to look them in the eye and show them that I had made it. But it was nothing like I'd expected. There was no overwhelming joy, no smug satisfaction, just a quiet sense of peace. I had done it for myself, not for them. And in that moment, I realized that I had freed myself from the need for their approval, from the longing for their acceptance. They begged me to forgive them, their voices barely above a whisper. They asked for a second chance, but I didn't need their apology. The words felt hollow, as if they came too late, as if the damage had already been done. I didn't need them to ask for forgiveness, and I didn't need them to ask for another chance. What mattered now was that I had moved on. I had built my life from scratch, and I had done it without them. I had created a future I could be proud of, and that was enough for me. I didn't need them anymore. They asked if we could talk, if we could find a way to make it work again, but I already knew the answer. I didn't want them in my life the way they thought I should. I didn't want them to feel like they had a right to tell me what I should do or how I should live. I had built a life where I was in control. No more manipulation, no more pretending. I had faced every challenge, every obstacle on my own, and I had come out stronger. There was no more room for them in my world. I stood up and walked toward the door, every step sure and steady. I didn't look back. I had nothing left to prove, nothing left to say. As I walked out of their office, I felt something unexpected. Not anger, not joy, just peace. A deep, satisfying peace. Because I had rebuilt my life from the ground up, and now I owned the future. It was mine, and I had earned every part of it. I didn't need them to recognize me anymore. I didn't need their approval or their excuses. I had become the person I always knew I could be, the person they had tried to erase. And now I was the one in charge. The world was mine. Conclusion: this story is about resilience, strength, and reclaiming what was taken. It's not just about survival. It's about building something better from the ashes of betrayal. Through hard work, perseverance, and the belief that we can rise above our circumstances, we can all take back control of our lives, even when the world tries to tear us apart. Now, I'd love to hear what you think. Drop your thoughts or feedback in the comments below. Whether you agree, disagree, or just want to share your own experience. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next story. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you found this story as powerful as I did. See you next time for more.